A reading from the letter of Paul to the Romans. Brothers and sisters, those who are in the flesh cannot please God. But you are not in the flesh. On the contrary, you are in the Spirit, if only the Spirit of God dwells in you. Whoever does not have the Spirit of Christ does not belong to him. But if Christ is in you, although the body is dead because of sin, the Spirit is alive because of righteousness. If the Spirit of the one who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, the one who raised Christ from the dead will give life to your mortal bodies also, through his Spirit dwelling in you. The word of the Lord.
Our second reading for this fifth Sunday of Lent comes from the letter of Paul to the Romans, and it follows beautifully on the first reading's theme of restoration of life, as promised to the exiled Israelites, the image of getting out of the tomb in order to be restored to life. But this is not just a restoration to homeland. It is by the gift of the Spirit. It is by God's graciousness that we are restored to life. It is by God's sharing of His very life that we are able to experience true life. This is the restoration from the dead that is promised in the first reading and affirmed by St. Paul. According to St. Paul, if the Spirit of Him who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, then He who raised Christ from the dead will bring your mortal bodies to life also through His Spirit dwelling in you. We are back to the Holy Spirit. We are told that it is the Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead. Jesus did not remain in the tomb. The history of Jesus and His ministry did not end in a tomb. It ended in the glorious resurrection. And this happens according to St. Paul because the Spirit of God dwells in Jesus. That same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead has been granted to us in baptism. And if that Spirit of life that raised Jesus from the dead dwells in us, then we will also be raised to life by the same Spirit dwelling in us. Again, let us spend time today just marveling at this mystery. We are being invited by God to share in His life. And God makes the promise and God makes the move. God shares His Spirit. The Spirit that restores Jesus to life, the Spirit that restored Israel to their homeland is the same Spirit poured into our hearts so that we may live. We may truly live. But living in the Spirit means also we have to die. Dying to sin. That part of us which is contrary to the Spirit of God should die. The resurrection of Jesus is death to death. And so the resurrection that we are sharing due to the Spirit is also death to sin. So St. Paul is telling us in his own way, choose. Choose between life and death. Would you prefer to live in sin, which is actually not a form of living? It is death. Or should you get out of that tomb of sinfulness in order to rise to a life of justice filled with the Spirit? And that is true life. as we come close to the celebration of the saving death and resurrection of Jesus, let us, like Jesus, face death squarely and choose life, life that is given by the Spirit of the Lord. Let us say, I will leave the place of the dead, the place of sin. I am not meant to stay there. God did not create me in order for my life to end in the cold and misery of a tomb. God created me for life. And that will happen if I live in faith, if I dwell in the Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead. Faith is life, sharing in the life that Jesus has won for us. So, dear brothers and sisters, get out of the tomb of sin and live in the Spirit.